The clock in the hall clicked steady as they whispered, "She won't be around much longer." Still, I didn't turn my head. Just tapped my cane, watched the red light blink alive. As their voices slithered through the vent, I traced the rim of my teacup, steady as breath. While their lies curled like steam in the air, I logged every word in silence. The same cane they mocked at dinner was filing their betrayal, line by line. That's when I decided, if they were writing my ending, I'd make sure it was the prologue to theirs. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The grandfather clock in the parlor struck 9, low, deep, and deliberate. It echoed through the bones of the Langston house, the kind of sound that made even the air feel older. Dorothy Langston, known to most as Dot, sat curled in her rose-colored wingback chair. A crocheted blanket draped over her knees, a lukewarm cup of chamomile tea beside her, untouched. Her fingers traced the worn edges of a hardback mystery novel, though her eyes hadn't moved past the same paragraph in 20 minutes. She wasn't reading, she was listening. Beyond the cracked door, the hallway creaked beneath careful feet. Rachel's voice followed, low, honeyed, with just a pinch of poison. "She's not signing anything unless she falls again. But if she does, I want the paperwork ready." There was a pause. The kind of pause that doesn't come from thought but cowardice. Connor's voice followed, softer. "She's not all there anyway." Dot didn't move. She didn't blink. Her fingers slid across the cane resting by her armrest, sleek, black walnut, custom weight balanced. She pressed her thumb to a tiny notch near the handle's curve, a soft click, almost like a sigh, and a pin-sized red light came alive, hidden from sight. Recording. The air shifted. She closed the book carefully, as if that final snap of the cover might shatter something fragile. Her face betrayed nothing. No anger, no betrayal. Just that gentle, half-lost smile everyone assumed meant confusion. Let them assume. Outside, their voices faded, footsteps moving away, but not too far. Dot remained still. She counted the seconds. 30, then 60. Only once she heard the refrigerator hum click on again did she reach for her teacup and pour the cold contents quietly into the philodendron beside her. Poison was too dramatic a word, but Rachel's special blends always tasted like control. She stood with effort, not because she needed to, but because they expected the effort. Each step toward the hallway was slow, methodical, tapping her cane along the polished hardwood with precision. She made sure the sound traveled. She paused at the door. On the console table beside the entryway, a family photo faced the wrong direction. Dot, Connor, and Rachel on a beach from years ago. Rachel had moved it, turned it away. Dot adjusted it back. Then she walked past the kitchen doorway, careful not to look in. "Oh, hi, Mom," Rachel chirped, too quickly. Dot turned, her eyes warm but watery. "Just heading to bed. Don't want to forget where the stairs are?" Connor offered a weak chuckle, eyes glued to the floor. Rachel didn't blink. "Need help up?" he asked. "Oh, heavens, no," Dot replied, patting her cane. "She and I go way back." She left before they could answer. At the top of the stairs, out of sight, she paused, just long enough to hear Rachel sigh and the rustle of paper. She reached her bedroom, shut the door quietly, then turned the deadbolt. Something she hadn't done in decades. On the nightstand, her tablet waited. She sat, lifted the cane gently, and unscrewed a small cap beneath the handle. A slim audio jack extended. One smooth plug into the tablet's port, and the download began, recordings flowing into labeled folders Henry had built for her. He was brilliant, discreet, and still sharp as glass. Tonight's file was labeled automatically, Nov Osis Hallway Threat Hawk Connor Present. Wave. She named the copy. They think I can't hear. Dot sat back, feeling the shape of a plan settle into her bones like the ache of a coming storm. She wasn't sure how far they were willing to go, but she knew one thing for certain. They'd already gone too far. Downstairs, a drawer slammed. Then Connor's voice. Urgent. Confused. "Where's the medical POA?" Rachel hissed. "It was right here. Did you move it?" Dot smiled, sharp and still. The next morning, they'd realize one of their important forms was gone, and they'd never guess who took it. By morning, the Langston kitchen smelled like civility. Rachel was already there when Dot came down. Bright robe, bright smile, every motion perfectly rehearsed. The kettle hissed on the stove, and sunlight scattered through the lace curtains like a painter's mercy. "Good morning, Dot." Rachel's voice sang out, a little too loud for courtesy. "I thought you might like your favorite, apple cinnamon tea. Helps with the nerves." Dot paused at the threshold, hands on her cane, pretending to remember which cupboard held the cups. In truth, she was listening again, listening for the subtle scrape of ceramic, the clink of spoon against porcelain, the faint tremor in Rachel's tone when she added, "Something extra." "Smells lovely," Dot said, lowering herself into a chair. "You're too good to me." Rachel turned, masking the flicker of tension behind her practiced grin. "Oh, it's nothing. You've been so tired lately. You deserve a little pampering." Connor shuffled in next, eyes bloodshot from a night of avoidance. He kissed his wife's cheek, muttered something about a conference call, and sat down across from Dot. His smile was hollow, the smile of a man trapped inside his own silence. Dot lifted the cup. The steam curled up, sweet and warm. She inhaled, clove, cinnamon, and beneath it, a faint bitterness that didn't belong. She let the rim touch her lip, held it there for a heartbeat, then set it back down gently. "Delicious," she murmured. Rachel's eyes flicked to the cup, checking how much had vanished. Dot's hands trembled convincingly. The show was on. Later, when the dishes were done and Rachel had gone to her Pilates class, Dot opened the pill tray on the counter. Her name in bold, D. Langston, morning, evening. She tilted the compartments open. 3 tiny tablets, one capsule slightly different from yesterday. The lettering was smudged, almost new. She smiled faintly, reached for a mason jar tucked behind the flower bin, and unscrewed the lid. Inside were rows of little capsules, each wrapped in dated tissue, labeled in her crisp stenographer's hand. Nov 6, changed color. Nov 7, slightly bitter. The jar clinked as she added the new pill. From the hallway, soft sneakers padded closer. Ellie's voice, young but knowing, broke the silence. "Grandma?" Dot turned, eyes bright. "In here, sweetheart." Ellie stepped in, backpack half-zipped, hair damp from her shower. She frowned. "Mom said you forgot to take your meds again." Dot smiled, tilting her head. "Did she now?" Ellie hesitated. "But you seem fine. Better than fine, actually. You remembered my test today." Dot chuckled softly. "I remember what matters." Ellie bit her lip, lowering her voice. "I think she's checking your tray, Grandma, like every morning. She writes things in her planner after." "Does she?" Dot reached out, brushing a strand of hair from Ellie's face. "Well, I suppose that's her way of caring." But the way she said caring made Ellie's brows knit. Dot stood, her cane clicking once on the tile. "I'm going to sit outside for a bit. Go on now, you'll be late." After Ellie left, Dot made her slow procession through the back door, cane tapping the brick steps in steady rhythm. The November air bit sharp, carrying the scent of oak leaves and iron gates. She reached her garden bench, the one Henry had fitted with the discreet recording switch beneath the armrest, and settled down. Through the open kitchen window, voices drifted again. Rachel had come back early. "She's slipping more," Rachel whispered. "Forgot her pills again." Connor's voice was tired, barely audible. Maybe it's just age, Rach. No, Rachel snapped, quieter now but venom in every syllable. It's timing. We have to be ready. If she gets confused at the doctor again, it's over. Dot's thumb slid across the underside of the bench. Click. The mic hummed to life inside the cane, pointed toward the window. The garden's stillness amplified every word. Rachel continued. Once we get the guardianship, we can move her to the care home. Everything else follows. Dot stared at her rose bushes, their petals curled from the early frost. She whispered to herself, almost tenderly, everything else follows. She stayed until the tea in her cup turned cold. When the voices faded, she stood and walked back inside, each step slower than the last. Her reflection in the hallway mirror met her gaze, steadier, sharper. Slipping, she murmured, echoing Rachel's word with a smile. That's what they call it when you stop pretending. Dot moved to the kitchen, unscrewed the mason jar again, and added a note inside on a folded scrap. Day 2. Still listening. Still remembering. She screwed the lid back on and hid it behind the flower. Outside, a car door slammed. Rachel's voice rang faintly from the driveway. Connor, tomorrow we push for the evaluation. Dot's smile faded. She reached for her cane, pressed her thumb once. The red light blinked. Dot was mid-sentence in a letter to her niece when the knock came, soft, polite, and completely performative. The kind of knock people use when they're trying not to seem like they're barging in. Come in, Rachel, Dot called, voice syrupy with age and calculation. Rachel stepped into the study holding a stack of papers and that same too-sunny smile she always wore when she was selling something. Sorry to interrupt your morning. I just brought up a quick form from the clinic. It's just housekeeping stuff. They're asking all patients to update their records before the new year. Dot didn't move from her writing desk. Records? My last appointment went just fine. Oh, it's nothing urgent, Rachel said lightly, slipping the papers onto the desk with a ballpoint pen on top. Insurance, medical release, that sort of thing. Just standard. I already filled out most of it for you. Just needs your signature at the bottom. You don't even need to read it unless you want to. Dot turned in her chair slowly, her fingers brushing against the cane resting beside her, her thumb instinctively locating the groove near the top. Click. The red light blinked twice before going dark. Recording stored. Not live this time. Rachel stood back like a nurse checking vitals, trying not to appear too eager. Dot picked up the form, her eyes drifting lazily down the page, glasses perched low on her nose. On the surface, everything looked harmless, medical history, emergency contacts. But the third page felt thicker, and the ink smelled freshly run. A glance beneath the corner revealed what Rachel clearly hoped she wouldn't see. Joint financial access, durable power of attorney, effective upon physician's discretion, highlighted in faint yellow. Sloppy, Rachel had always underestimated how many years Dot spent transcribing legal depositions. These things stood out like blood on snow. Such a blur these days, Dot muttered absently, reaching for the pen. Her hand trembled. Not from weakness, but muscle memory. The same way she'd faked fatigue in court to delay a hostile witness. She scribbled her name, or something resembling it. The lines tangled, a mess of loops and false starts. No real letters, just a script of convincing nonsense. Rachel's smile flickered just for a heartbeat, then came back too strong. There you go. Thank you. I'll drop this off with the clinic tomorrow. Dot let the pen fall from her fingers. My hands shake more these days. Maybe I should rest. Of course. Rachel leaned in with rehearsed sympathy, but her fingers pinched the papers too tightly as she scooped them up. You've earned some rest. Dot nodded slowly, pretending not to watch her leave. Only when the door clicked shut did she exhale through her nose, controlled, steady. She turned back to her desk, pulled a notepad from the drawer, and wrote one clean line in block letters. Forgery attempt, Nov 8, recorded. Signature not legal. Then she tore the page out and tucked it behind her tablet case. The sound of gravel crunching outside signaled Henry's arrival. She made her way to the back patio just in time to see him lift a small black case from his trunk. His gait was slower these days, but his mind was sharp as ever, and his loyalty even sharper. "You look like hell, Henry," Dot said, smirking. "You should see the other guy," he replied, lifting the case onto the wrought iron table. Inside, nestled in a foam cutout, sat a small transmitter no larger than a postage stamp. "Voice-activated backup," he said. "Connects directly to your tablet. Mic kicks in only when someone says your name or the word signature. Everything stores to the cloud folder I set up. Off-site. Redundant. Ironclad." Dot's eyebrows rose. "Overkill?" Henry unscrewed her cane's handle, revealing the hollowed-out compartment inside. "After what Rachel just tried? I'd call it appropriate." They worked in silence for a few minutes, the November wind rustling the dry ivy overhead. Henry reassembled the cane, twisted it twice, and handed it back. It felt just a fraction heavier. "Good." "You think she'll notice she got gibberish instead of a signature?" Henry asked. Dot shook her head. "She didn't even notice when I stopped drinking the tea." Henry chuckled, grim and satisfied. "Your move, then." Dot stood, testing the balance of the cane with one hand, her other smoothing her sweater down as she turned toward the house. "It always was." Inside, Rachel's voice floated down the hall, cheerful and false. "We'll bring it to the doctor tomorrow. Once it's official, we can move on things." Dot froze mid-step, eyes narrowing. Not if. Once. Rachel wasn't giving up. She was escalating. The dining room was already full of clinking forks and murmured conversation when Dot entered. Her steps were deliberate, slow enough to hear how laughter died a fraction too soon when she appeared in the doorway. The overhead chandelier threw soft amber light across the table, making the polished wood gleam like varnished history. 4 places were set, silverware aligned, glasses filled. Food passed in rhythm. But there were only 3 plates. Dot's chair at the end of the table waited, empty, cushion fluffed, napkin folded. But her plate was conspicuously absent. Just a vacant circle where a meal should be. She blinked once, then smiled. Rachel looked up mid-bite, fork hovering just past her glossed lips. "Oh, Mom, we thought you were napping. I told Connor you'd probably already eaten upstairs." Connor didn't meet Dot's gaze. His jaw flexed as he chewed, staring down at a bite of roasted chicken like it might tell him how to feel. Dot walked to her seat and settled in without a word, resting her cane beside her. "Smells delicious," she said, tone syrupy, eyes on the food that wasn't hers. "Is there any left?" Rachel offered a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. Not much. The chicken went fast." Connor swallowed hard and added, "I thought you didn't want heavy dinners anymore." Dot didn't answer. Instead, she reached for the untouched water glass, sipped, and looked around the table with the soft gaze of someone cataloging everything. Rachel rose, carrying her own plate to the sink. "There's soup in the fridge. I'll heat it later if you want." "That's thoughtful of you," Dot replied, folding her hands. The conversation moved on. Ellie barely spoke, her fork pushing peas in a slow, concentric pattern on her plate. Her eyes flicked to Dot's empty setting, then to her mother, then away. Her mouth tightened, but she didn't speak. Later that night, long after the dishwasher hummed and the house had grown quiet, a soft knock tapped at Dot's door. 3 short raps, a pause, and 1 longer one. Ellie's code. Dot opened the door. Ellie stood there in her flannel pajama pants and hoodie, a paper napkin-wrapped bundle in her hands. "I wasn't hungry either," Ellie whispered, slipping past her. But this looked better than soup. She opened the napkin to reveal a half sandwich, ham and cheese with the crusts cut off, the way Dot used to make them for her when she was small. Dot didn't thank her. She just took it and smiled. As Ellie sat cross-legged at the foot of the bed, Dot moved to her desk and opened her phone. A red banking alert blinked at the top of the screen. Withdrawal alert, Nov 9, amount $5,000, location, Langston Family Joint Account ATM. Dot stared at the line, jaw tightening. She tapped once, pulled up the transaction ID, then quietly took a screenshot. The sound of the shutter was crisp, final. She dropped it into her encrypted cloud folder under a new subdirectory labeled Connor, Compliance via Silence. From the hallway downstairs came the sound of Rachel rummaging in the pantry, quick, annoyed, deliberate. Dot's phone buzzed again. An email notification. Subject: Urgent household adjustment. Inventory expired items from Rachel Langston. Body: discarded. Spice rack today. All were expired. Will reorder essentials next week. Dot's lips curled, humorless. She stood and walked to the top of the stairs. From her vantage point, she watched Rachel open the trash lid and drop in the wooden spice rack Dot had kept since her wedding. Cinnamon, marjoram, nutmeg from Charleston. All gone. Too many old things in this house anyway, Rachel muttered to herself. Dot didn't speak, didn't move, just watched. That night, Dot added a new note to her cane log. Nov 9, starved at dinner. 5K vanished, spices trashed. She's pushing erasure now, not subtle anymore. Then, in her smallest handwriting, Ellie fed me. Don't forget that. She turned off the light and lay down, fully dressed, the cane beside her like a weapon waiting for the war. The morning after the spice rack met the trash, Dot sat alone in the solarium, early light slanting through the beveled windows and catching the fine dust floating in the air. She wore her gray sweater, the one Ruth had once said made her look too sane to ignore, and her cane rested across her lap like a sleeping dog. The tablet on the side table pinged once. The files had finished uploading. She tapped open the folder labeled Langston Evidence, Phase 1. Audio, quien clip toa muats Rachel, tas intent guardianship. MP3 audio cal clip zero tutuas Connor, complicit statement. MP3 audio, gal clip zaxo 3 med form deception.mp3, screenshot transaction, $5,000.png, screenshot hot expired items, email.png. She pressed send. The name on the email, Ruth Ellis, Eskeeter. The subject line, let's begin. 12 minutes later, the tablet buzzed again. FaceTime request. Ruth's face filled the screen, freshly lipsticked and already halfway into what looked like her second espresso. Well, damn, she said without preamble. That's not smoke, that's fire. Want to go nuclear? Dot smiled softly. Not yet, but light the match. Ruth leaned back, calculating. You ready to do this your way? I'm too old for theirs. Then I'll write you a new will today, Ruth said, pulling a pen from her bun. Airtight. No contest clause. Revokes all prior versions. Witnessed. Notarized. They won't touch a dime. Dot's expression hardened just slightly. Good. Because I'm tired of being generous. They ended the call 15 minutes later, and Dot stared at the blank wall across from her for a long moment. The air in the house felt heavier today, like the walls themselves were starting to anticipate a reckoning. That afternoon, Henry arrived with a canvas tote that looked like it belonged at a college tech fair. Guest room? He asked, already moving. They worked in silence, side by side. Dot held the power strip as Henry snaked wires through the antique vent grates, careful not to disturb the old molding. He mounted a tiny mic behind a sconce just above the headboard, invisible to anyone not crawling with a flashlight. Remote triggered, Henry said, flipping open his phone. You ping it, it records. Clean feed. Automatic backup to our shared drive. Dot looked around the room, the one Rachel had redecorated without asking. Gray throw pillows, beige sheets, soulless framed quotes on the wall. Gratitude changes everything. You ever think maybe we're the crazy ones? Henry said, half joking. Dot didn't answer. Her gaze was on the pillows. How perfect they were, how untouched. She lowered her voice. Let's make sure they don't get to stage a single scene in here without us watching. That night, Rachel stood at the edge of the guest room, arms folded, eyes scanning the space like she owned it. Connor leaned in the doorway, wilted and uneasy. Rachel's voice was a low simmer. We're one fall away, one bad spell, that's it. Then we move her out. Connor ran a hand through his thinning hair. You sure this is the way? Rachel looked at him like she'd married a cardboard cutout. Do you want her controlling everything until she dies in that chair? Because I don't. Connor didn't respond. Inside the cane, behind the drywall, and in the sconce above the headboard, every word was being recorded. Dot listened from the hallway, out of sight, one hand on the stair rail, the other steady on her cane. The light outside was fading, and with it, her patience. She went back upstairs, slipped into her bedroom, and opened her notebook to a clean page. She wrote in tight, deliberate script, Nov 10, Ruth is in. Henry's set the room. Guest room hot. Rachel said, one more incident and we move her out. They're escalating. So will I. She capped the pen and clicked off the lamp. Dot was trimming a dead bloom off her orchid when she heard the knock. Not the careful, patronizing kind Rachel used. Not Connor's timid tap. This one was sharp, measured. Ellie. Come in, Dot said, without turning. The door opened, then clicked shut again. Ellie stood in the middle of the room, hands in the sleeves of her oversized school hoodie, jaw set tight. Her eyes looked older than 15. You need to tell me what's going on. Dot clipped another wilted petal. Be more specific, sweetheart. Ellie stepped forward, her voice low but steady. Mom's been whispering with Dad every night, in the laundry room, like I can't hear through the vent. She's talking about moving you. Dot set the shears down gently on the windowsill. They've been planning that longer than you've known how to drive. Ellie's throat worked. Why haven't you said anything? Dot turned now. Why haven't you? Ellie blinked, caught off guard. Dot pointed to the armchair by her desk. Sit down. You're old enough to know what betrayal tastes like. Ellie obeyed slowly. The air between them stretched thin with the weight of unspoken things. Dot reached for her tablet and tapped open the folder titled Langston Evidence, Phase 1. I've been listening, Dot said quietly, recording, collecting, watching. And I've sent the first pieces to my attorney. Ellie leaned forward, frowning as the files appeared. She read the file names, then tapped to play one. Rachel's voice filled the room. She won't be around much longer. Just play along. Then Connor's voice, flat and resigned. She's not all there anyway. Ellie flinched like she'd been slapped. Dot paused the file. For a long moment Ellie said nothing. Her eyes stayed fixed on the screen, her hands gripped tightly in her lap. Then, quietly, they were my parents. Dot softened, but didn't reach for her. And I was your ride to every school pickup they forgot. I was the one who remembered your birthday when they were in Napa. Ellie nodded slowly, her mouth trembling. I know. That's the worst part. You've been the real one. Dot's breath hitched for a split second before she steadied herself. You don't have to decide anything right now, Ellie. But I do need you to be quiet. For a little while longer. Ellie met her eyes. How quiet? Dot's voice dropped to a whisper. Long enough to hear what they say when they think I'm not listening. Silence settled again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was thick with understanding. Then Ellie reached for the tablet. You need help labeling these. If it goes to court, the judge will want dates and keywords. Dot raised an eyebrow. You've been hanging around Ruth too much. She helped me with my civics essay, Ellie muttered, already swiping through the files. Got an A-. They worked for the next hour, heads together, organizing clips by relevance. Ellie suggested folder tags: financial, medical lies, guardianship threats. Dot watched her, quietly proud and quietly heartbroken all at once. Downstairs, the front door opened. Rachel's voice drifted up. Yes, I've scheduled it. We'll call it a long-term care conversation. Keep it neutral. Dot locked eyes with Ellie. Ellie's mouth opened slightly. You think she's setting up an intervention? Dot leaned back in her chair, thoughtful. She's setting a trap. And she's underestimating how many witnesses I have now. Ellie's jaw clenched. What do you want me to do? Dot gave her a long, measuring look. Then she reached for a blank legal pad and scribbled a note, folding it in half. Take this to Ruth on your way to school tomorrow. Don't open it. Ellie tucked it into her backpack without asking questions. Then, softer. What if they come for you before we're ready? Dot tapped the cane beside her, the one now equipped with 4 recording triggers and a remote cloud backup. Then I make sure they regret it. The vase shattered first, a loud, clean crack that rang out like a warning shot, followed by the unmistakable sound of something heavier, body or furniture, hitting the hardwood floor. Rachel's heels skidded across the entry hall seconds later. Dot? Her voice was sharp, almost eager. Dot lay still near the staircase, one arm outstretched, the cane tipped beside her like a weapon that had finally given out. Her cardigan was askew. A faint scratch bloomed red against her temple. Not deep, but enough. Rachel dropped to her knees like she practiced it. Oh my God, Mom! Connor, call 911, she fell! Dot blinked slowly. She wasn't unconscious, but she didn't speak. Not yet. Connor scrambled from the den, phone already in hand, his voice shaking as he fumbled through the address. Rachel leaned close to Dot's face, just enough to whisper, You really should have signed those papers when you had the chance. Dot's eyes flicked toward her with the smallest glimmer of clarity, then closed. By the time the paramedics arrived, Rachel was pacing, hair artfully tousled, voice rehearsed. She must have slipped. She's been forgetting where she leaves her cane lately. This morning, she almost put the toaster in the fridge. Ellie stood by the stairs, clutching the banister hard enough to turn her knuckles white. She didn't say a word, just watched. The lead paramedic knelt beside Dot. Ma'am? Can you hear me? Dot's eyelids fluttered. She turned her head slightly toward Ellie, just enough for her granddaughter to see the wink. Ellie's breath caught. Vitals are good, the medic murmured to his partner. Small abrasion. Nothing broken. Rachel hovered nearby, her tone pitched for sympathy. She's been confused lately. We've been meaning to take her in for a cognitive exam. You know, just in case. The nurse nodded, scribbling something on a clipboard. Any new meds or interactions? Rachel opened her mouth to answer, but Dot sat up, too smoothly. Hydrochlorothiazide, 25 milligrams every morning. No new prescriptions. Last dosage taken yesterday at 8:02 a.m. and skipped today, by choice. Everyone turned. Dot's voice was dry, calm, and surgical. Rachel froze, color draining. Mom, maybe we shouldn't... Dot smiled faintly. You said I was confused. Connor stepped forward, rubbing the back of his neck. She's just a little shaken up. The medic studied Dot, then turned to Rachel. Ma'am, she's recalling her full medication regimen post-fall without hesitation. Doesn't strike me as disoriented. Rachel's mouth worked silently. The paramedic helped Dot onto the gurney as gently as he could. We'll still take her in to be safe. It's minor, a sprain at most, but I'd rather she be checked properly. As they rolled her toward the ambulance, one of the medics hung back and quietly pulled Connor aside. "Just so you know, she's sharp. I've seen confused patients. She's not one of them. She's letting you think she is. But she's not." Connor looked like he wanted to evaporate. Inside the ambulance, Dot rested her head back on the cushion, her fingers curled lightly around her cane. Her voice, low, almost playful, was barely audible over the whirring equipment. "Maybe next time, they'll think twice before staging a fall for me." Ellie, watching from the porch, met her grandmother's gaze through the back window of the ambulance and nodded once. She understood. Savannah's probate courthouse smelled like lemon polish and nerves. The corridors were too bright, the air too cold. Rachel had chosen her outfit carefully. Pale blue suit, gold watch, hair tied back to signal competence. She looked like someone about to win something. Connor trailed behind her in a wrinkled jacket, clutching a manila folder he hadn't opened. Ellie sat on the bench outside the courtroom, earbuds in, pretending not to watch the door they disappeared through. Inside, Dot sat upright at the respondent's table, her cane balanced neatly across her knees. Her gray sweater was pressed, her lipstick subtle, her eyes razor-sharp. Rachel leaned across the aisle and whispered, "Don't worry, Mom. This is just procedure. It's for your own protection." Dot smiled thinly. "That's what rattlesnakes say before they bite." The bailiff called the room to order. Judge Halpern, mid-60s with reading glasses that made him look perpetually unimpressed, cleared his throat. "We're here regarding Petition 1127, Langston versus Langston, for temporary medical guardianship over Ms. Dorothy Langston." Rachel stood, practiced humility dripping from every word. "Your Honor, we're only here out of concern. My mother-in-law's memory has declined significantly. There have been falls, missed medications, and moments of confusion that endanger her safety. We're not seeking control, just protection." Dot's attorney was supposed to be a mild-mannered estate associate from her old law firm. That's who Rachel expected. Instead, the courtroom door opened, and in walked Ruth Ellis, heels clicking like punctuation, a leather briefcase swinging in rhythm. Her crimson blazer cut through the sterile air. Rachel's smile faltered. "Counsel for Ms. Langston," Ruth announced smoothly, taking her seat beside Dot. "Apologies for the delay. My client had a slight scheduling conflict with her yoga class." Dot hid her smirk behind a tissue. The judge nodded. "Proceed." Ruth stood, her voice calm, unhurried. "Your Honor, my client is of sound mind and has evidence that will make that abundantly clear. We request to play an audio file, recorded on her medical device for safety purposes." Rachel stiffened. "Audio file? We haven't been provided." Ruth held up a flash drive. "Transparency works both ways." Judge Halpern gestured to the clerk. "Play it." The courtroom speakers crackled to life. First came footsteps, a door closing, then Rachel's voice, sweet and venomous all at once. "She won't be around much longer. Just play along." Then Connor's hesitant murmur. "She's not all there anyway." The air went still. Even the bailiff looked up from his notes. Ruth didn't blink. "My client's cane contains a directional microphone, installed for her safety, given her history of falls. The recordings are date-stamped, authenticated, and verified by an independent technician." Rachel's face drained of color. She records everything?" Dot finally spoke, her tone gentle but precise. "Only what's said when people think I can't hear." Judge Halpern removed his glasses, exhaled, and scribbled something on the docket. "Ms. Langston, this court finds no evidence of mental incapacity. The petition for guardianship is denied." He turned his gaze to Rachel. "And I'd advise you to tread carefully. This borders on coercion." Rachel's lips trembled. "Your Honor, I—" "Dismissed," Halpern said, hammering his gavel once. The echo was thunderous. As they exited the courtroom, Cameras from the local paper clicked. Someone had tipped off the press. Ruth leaned close to Dot and murmured, "Consider the match lit." Dot replied, "Now let's see what burns." Outside, beneath the courthouse oak trees, Ellie was waiting. She slipped her phone into her pocket, eyes wide. "They played it? In front of everyone?" Dot nodded. "Sometimes silence is your best witness." Ellie smiled faintly, then asked, almost shyly, "Can I read your will someday?" Dot tilted her head. "Why?" Ellie shrugged. "Because I think I already know what kind of woman wrote it." Dot laughed softly. "You might. But let's make sure the right people find out last." The Langston dining room hadn't seen a full Sunday dinner in years. The chandelier was lit low, casting golden rings on the linen-covered table. The good china was out. Crystal glasses gleamed like they remembered how to matter. A roast sat in the center, perfectly sliced. Collard greens steamed beside it. There was cornbread, still warm, and the scent of rosemary was thick enough to anchor old memories to the walls. Dot had planned it down to the second. Rachel arrived first, overdressed in a slate silk blouse that looked more like she was attending a charity board meeting than sitting down for a family meal. Her smile strained. "This looks lovely." Connor followed, slower, his posture already braced like he'd walked into an ambush. "Smells great, Mom." Ellie entered last, her hoodie traded for a modest black cardigan. She glanced once at Dot, who gave the smallest nod. No words were needed. They sat. The silence was stiff. Rachel reached for the water pitcher as if she might fill it with control. "I'm glad we could all come together," Dot began, unfolding her napkin. Her voice was warm, measured. "It's been too long since we had a meal where everyone pretended they liked each other." Rachel laughed lightly. "Well, you know how busy things have been. Doctor visits, paperwork, the hearing." Dot raised her hand. The room fell silent like it had been rehearsed. "I didn't ask you here to rehash any of that," she said. "I asked you here to return something." From beneath the table she lifted 3 folders, neatly stacked, color-coded, labeled in her careful cursive, "Rachel, Connor, Ellie." She handed them out one by one, like communion. Ellie took hers quietly, eyes flicking down but not opening it. Rachel hesitated before reaching. Connor stared at his folder like it might explode. "What is this?" Rachel asked, the words jagged at the edges. Dot sat back, folding her hands in her lap. "That, my dear, is everything you thought I was too senile to notice. Audio files, screenshots, bank logs, a lovely little transcript of a conversation in the guest room. You remember? The one where you said all you needed was one more incident to move me out." Rachel's knuckles went white around the folder. Connor looked away, jaw tight. "Mom." Dot cut him off. "No, you had every chance to stop this. Every moment when you could have said something. You chose silence. That makes you complicit." He flinched. Ellie opened her folder gently. Inside were photos. Dot smiling with her at age 6 on the front porch. Dot at Ellie's spelling bee. A list of every time Rachel and Connor had left her off school pickup duty over the years, annotated in Ellie's own handwriting. Audio timestamps, text threads, a life defended in receipts. Rachel stood abruptly. "This is outrageous? You're spying on your own family? You, what, record every conversation like some kind of paranoid old... Like someone who knew what was coming," Dot said evenly. Rachel opened her folder. She stopped speaking. There was a printed email thread. One she'd forgotten about. From months ago. Whispering Pines application. Her own words. "If the fall doesn't do it, the memory issue angle will stick. Either way, we'll get her in before the year's out." Dot tilted her head. You forgot I worked for 40 years transcribing court documents. I live in the details. I don't forget. Rachel's voice cracked. You think this makes you the victim? Dot stood. Her cane tapped once against the floor. No. It makes me the archivist of my own damn life, and I'm not handing it over to people who treat me like a deadline. Ellie stood too, steady now. I'm with her. Rachel turned to Connor. Are you seriously going to let this happen? Connor looked up at Dot, then back at his folder. He didn't speak, but his hands dropped it on the table like it was burning. Dot looked from one to the other. This dinner is the only warning you'll get. The will is rewritten. The house has already been transferred. The only thing left to do is leave when I ask. Rachel's voice was a whisper now. You can't do that. Dot smiled. I already did. It started with the sound of drawers opening too hard. Rachel's signature move. Make chaos feel like control. Dot sat at the kitchen table with her tea cooling in front of her, the air thick with rosemary and finality. Ellie sat across from her, legs tucked under her, arms wrapped around a pillow like she was bracing for a storm. Upstairs, the storm had already started. A suitcase thudded closed. A closet door slammed. Rachel's voice followed, sharp, wet, angry. I want a lawyer. Dot didn't look up from her tablet. She sipped. Mine's already been to court. Rachel appeared in the doorway like a shadow too big for its body. Her eyes were red but unbroken. You don't get to throw us out of our own house. Dot turned. It was never yours. She reached into a folder and slid a document across the table without ceremony. 30 days, notarized, certified mail copy already sent. That gives you until December 5th. Rachel didn't touch the paper. She just stared at it like it might bite. Connor? She called over her shoulder. He didn't answer. Ellie stood, quietly taking her plate to the sink. Rachel followed her with her eyes. You're seriously staying with her? Ellie turned, calm and unshaken. I was always with her. You just didn't see it. Upstairs, another suitcase was wheeled across the floor. Connor emerged at the landing, his tie loose, his eyes hollow. You don't mean this, he said, voice brittle. This is just a message, right? Dot stood slowly, pressing one hand to the cane. I meant it the first time you didn't speak up. Connor opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked tired, like a man who had held too many coats in too many rooms where power passed him by. Rachel's voice rose. We've sacrificed everything for you. We managed your bills. We kept this house running. We gave you structure, respect. And this is the thanks we get? Dot looked her in the eye. What you gave me was isolation, gaslight, theft. I don't confuse that with love. Rachel's face twisted. You think people won't talk? When they find out an old woman evicted her own son? Dot didn't blink. I hope they do. Maybe they'll ask what kind of son gets evicted by his mother and still thinks he's the victim. Rachel stormed past her, shoulder clipping Dot's arm. Dot didn't flinch. From the hallway, Rachel's voice cracked. You're going to die alone, Dorothy. Dot turned, eyes steady. Not tonight, and not with you in the house. Rachel disappeared upstairs. A door slammed with enough force to rattle the light fixture. Ellie returned from the kitchen, a small duffel over her shoulder. Guest room's clean. I moved my stuff in after dinner. Dot looked at her, warmth creeping through the old bones of a heart that had been bruised too many times. You sure? Ellie smiled. I picked my side 3 chapters ago. Dot chuckled softly, motioning for her to sit back down. Then come. We have work to do. 30 days is a long time when you know where to look. Upstairs, Rachel began to sob. Loud. Performative. Dot didn't move. Ellie reached for the laptop and pulled up the shared drive. A new audio file had uploaded just before dinner. They opened it. Rachel's voice. Earlier that day. On the phone. She's going to ruin everything. I should have pushed her down the stairs when I had the chance. 3 days after the family dinner, Dot woke before sunrise to a notification. Unauthorized login attempt. Will draft file 4. Access denied. She blinked once, unsurprised. The air outside her window was still velvet dark, but the glow of Rachel's desperation had clearly begun to spill into her inbox. She reached for the tablet and opened the dashboard. A second alert blinked. 5 failed login attempts. Username: R. Langston IP traced. Upstairs hallway, 2:47 a.m. Dot exhaled through her nose, dry and unsurprised. Couldn't even wait a week, she muttered. In her inbox, an encrypted message from Ruth waited. Final will draft encrypted. Triple auth. Local version inaccessible. Hard drive copy in progress. Dot typed back with the calm of someone who had planted every trap before the first footsteps fell. Tell Henry, deliver the drive by noon, front porch drop, no contact. At 12:02 p.m., a brown paper bag arrived, tucked neatly between the petunias and the milk box. Inside, a slim black hard drive wrapped in a silk handkerchief. No logo, no label. Air-gapped. No Wi-Fi, no cloud, no way in. Dot placed it inside the hollowed-out copy of The Art of War that sat between her cookbook and gardening manuals. At 12:06 p.m., the front door creaked. Rachel. Fake casual. Morning robe. Too much perfume for someone just stretching her legs. She opened the front door and scanned the porch like she expected something to be waiting for her. The bag was already gone. By Thursday, Rachel's carefully lacquered calm had begun to crack. Dot had invited 4 of her oldest neighbors for tea on the patio. The invitation had been handwritten. The napkins matched the season: pumpkin scones, mint tea. A playlist of Ella Fitzgerald low in the background. They didn't talk about family. Not directly. They talked about how easy it is to be erased in your own house. About children who mistake inheritance for entitlement. And how sometimes you don't need to shout to be heard, just record everything. Mrs. Dobbins, who hadn't spoken to Dot in 6 months, leaned forward and asked, "You're saying someone tried to have you declared incompetent?" Dot stirred her tea. "I'm saying someone thought she could write my ending for me, and forgot I still hold the pen." The women clinked glasses with a slow, reverent nod. Stories, after all, were currency in this neighborhood. The next morning, 3 envelopes slid through various mail slots on the block. Each included a photocopy of Rachel's Whispering Pines application, her signed email thread planning Dot's removal, and a printed transcript of the audio where she threatened to push Dot down the stairs. No return address, no fingerprints. By the weekend, Rachel had stopped going to the neighborhood Pilates class. Connor was gone by Monday. Dot watched from the porch as he packed his car, a black duffel, his laptop, a box of old records he never played. Ellie didn't say goodbye, neither did Dot. He lingered in the driveway like he wanted a moment of grace, or pity, or even just recognition. Dot stood behind the screen door, still, watching. She gave him none of it. He pulled away without a word. That night, Dot made a pot of soup, turned on the jazz radio, and ate dinner with Ellie under the patio string lights. "Do you think he'll come back?" Ellie asked. Dot didn't look up. Not before she turns on him, and she will. Desperation's a lonely thing. Ellie sipped her tea. "What about Rachel?" Dot tapped her cane lightly against the floor. "She's still trying to win a war I already buried in a safe place." The Langston garden hadn't seen a party like this in years, maybe decades. It was early afternoon, the sun softened by slow drifting clouds, and the hydrangeas were holding their bloom like they understood they were part of something. The patio tables had been dressed with cotton linens. Lemonade sat sweating in a glass pitcher. A jazz trio played near the back trellis, and Ellie, perched on a stool with her hair pulled into a neat braid, tapped a small tambourine gently along with the rhythm. Dot sat beneath the striped awning in her favorite wooden rocker, a glass of iced tea in one hand, her polished cane resting beside her like a baton she no longer had to swing. Her cardigan was seafoam green, her lipstick was deliberate. Everything about her posture said, "I survived you, and now I host." Guests milled about in small groups: neighbors, two retired judges, Ruth's paralegal, a few older women who had once whispered but now watched Dot with quiet admiration. Ruth stood near the flower bed, glass in hand, her blazer thrown over one shoulder and a twinkle in her eye that only came when justice had already been served. She clinked her glass gently with a spoon, and the garden hushed. "I'd like to make a toast," she said, stepping into the center. "To Dot Langston, for reminding all of us that silence is a weapon, but only if you hand it to the wrong people." Laughter rippled around the patio. Ruth raised her glass higher. "For some, justice comes with a bang. For others, it walks in on a cane, wearing a pressed sweater, and quietly rearranges the future." Everyone clapped. Ellie gave a soft whoop that made Dot laugh. Dot stood slowly, not with weakness, but ceremony. "Thank you," she said, voice clear. "But I didn't do anything extraordinary. I simply listened. Then I acted." Someone near the back called, "Is it true, what she did?" A second voice added, "Rachel's staying with her sister now, isn't she?" Dot just smiled and sat back down, crossing her legs neatly. "I've learned not to speak too much about what's already been filed." Another round of laughter, but underneath it, a current of awe. Henry arrived last, as always. He wore a soft gray vest and carried a long rectangular box tied with twine. When he reached Dot, he crouched beside her chair with the caution of old knees and opened the lid. Inside was a cane, deep mahogany, high gloss finish, silver cap engraved with a single word: "Still." Dot inhaled once, softly. "No mic," Henry said. "No wires. Just a cane this time. Just strength." She reached in, fingers trembling slightly for the first time in weeks, and lifted it from the velvet lining. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Henry smiled. "It's yours. For the version of life that doesn't require defense." Dot looked to the fireplace mantel on the back wall of the porch. Slowly, she stood, walked over, and set the old cane, scratched, dented, red light tucked beneath the grip, against the polished wood. It leaned there quietly, like a retired soldier. Still whole, still standing, but no longer needed. Guests applauded again. This time not just for her, but for what she symbolized now. Not survival, not revenge, command. The garden buzzed back to life. Music, clinking glasses. Gossip held a little softer now, a little more careful. Dot took her seat again, the new cane across her lap like a crown passed down. The courthouse clerk looked up from the computer and blinked. "You're sure about this, ma'am?" Dot, dressed in slate blue and calm as fog, handed over the notarized envelope with the same grace she used to serve Sunday tea. "I've never been more sure of anything," she replied. "The house, the accounts, the land. It all goes to Ellie Langston, effective immediately." The clerk nodded, stamped the file with an official received, and passed back a clean receipt. Dot folded it carefully into her purse. Outside, the air smelled like late December pine and old brick. Savannah's winter was more a suggestion than a season, but the chill in the air suited her. Ellie waited by the car, her hands tucked into the sleeves of a too-big denim jacket. When Dot handed her the envelope, Ellie opened it slowly, reading the top line of the transfer document. Her name. Alone. Her throat tightened. "You didn't have to." "I know," Dot said, "but I did." That's the difference between the people who expect everything and the ones who earned it without asking. Ellie hugged her right there on the courthouse steps. Neither of them said anything more. The news reached Connor first. He filed a formal petition to contest the transfer, claimed emotional manipulation, claimed diminished capacity, claimed a dozen things that had once been convenient assumptions. But Ruth's paperwork had teeth. By the time the motion was dismissed, Connor received a tidy invoice for court fees and unfounded obstruction, $8,132, due in full. Dot never responded to the email he sent that night. The subject line read, "Please, just talk to me." She archived it, unread. Rachel tried a different route. She called Ruth's office twice, left a voicemail the second time. "I want to come clean," she said, voice flatter than usual. There were mistakes, misunderstandings. I was under stress. Ruth didn't respond, but her intern did. With one sentence by certified mail. All communication regarding Ms. Langston's estate must go through legal counsel. 3 weeks later, Rachel filed for Chapter 13 bankruptcy. Debt, legal costs, an unexpected loss of joint housing privileges. Her sister stopped returning calls. One of the Pilates women was now using Dot's quote about inheritance and entitlement at brunches. By New Year's, Rachel was living out of a rented condo near the airport. And Dot? Dot didn't gloat. She baked more. She and Ellie painted the guest room blue-gray and converted it into an art studio. Henry installed a new security system. Ellie programmed the access codes. Ruth visited once a week, always with a folder and a new piece of gossip. "You're a legend now," she told Dot one afternoon, settling into the kitchen nook. A few elder law firms asked to review the case. 2 seminars already used it for training. Someone from Tulane Law called it the Kane case. Dot laughed softly. It wasn't the cane. "No," Ruth agreed, "but it heard everything. That's got a ring to it." In March, Ellie played a podcast over breakfast. A true crime meets elder law feature. Clean audio, somber narration. "The cane that heard everything," the host said. Dorothy Langston's quiet resistance changed how elder abuse is documented and prosecuted in the Southeast. Ellie turned the volume down and looked at her grandmother. "Do you want to hear the rest?" she asked. Dot stirred her coffee, not looking up. "I already lived it." But Ellie kept it playing, just loud enough to hear the closing line. And in the end, it wasn't revenge. It was self-defense. With better evidence. Ellie smiled. She already knew the ending. The attic had never been Ellie's favorite place. It smelled like cedar and dust and the ache of things no one talks about. But it was where Dot told her to look. Not directly, just a passing comment over tea. If you're ever upstairs and curious, check inside the old sewing basket, the one with the broken clasp. Not everything I passed down came in folders. So on a quiet Sunday afternoon, Ellie pulled the attic ladder down and climbed slowly into the dim. She found the basket beneath a sheet-draped rocker. The lid barely held, the fabric frayed from decades of sun and memory. Inside, a few buttons, a thimble, 2 yellowed photos of Ellie as a toddler in Dot's lap. Mouth open mid-laugh, and folded beneath them, a single sheet of stationery. Dot's handwriting in dark, unfaltering ink. Use truth like a cane. Quiet, steady, always ready. Ellie stared at it for a long time. She didn't cry. She took a picture of the note and walked down the ladder with the quiet certainty of someone now carrying a mission, not just a memory. 2 weeks later, she launched a blog. Listening loudly. She didn't use Dot's name, not at first, but the stories were unmistakable. A granddaughter, a woman, a cane, microphones and paperwork, trust betrayed, trust rebuilt. The first post went viral by accident. The third was picked up by an elder care advocacy group. By the fifth, Dot's name was in the comments, along with hundreds of others, people saying things like, "My mom went through this," or, "I wish I had a Dot." Ellie never made it flashy. No banners, no ad revenue, just stories, one at a time. As spring crept back over the Langston property, Dot began to move slower. She forgot names less, but tired more. Her cardigan sleeves hung looser. Her steps grew shorter. She didn't complain. She planted tomatoes. Henry came every Wednesday without fail. Sometimes with soup. Sometimes with upgrades to Ellie's security system, once with a bouquet of tulips and a smirk. "She's got her own legacy now," he told Dot, motioning toward the blog. "You just lit the first match." Dot sipped her tea. "No, I just handed her the matchbook." Ruth sent cards, always typed, always signed with a flourish, to the sharpest pen in Savannah, to the client who made courtrooms fun again, to the woman who made me rewrite my own will twice. Ellie began to repaint the upstairs hallway. She cataloged the tapes, digitized the files, created a private archive on a password-protected drive labeled .archive such a vault. She left the old cane on the mantel. Never dusted it, never moved it. Some things belonged exactly where they ended. At night, Ellie sat on the porch with Dot, just like before. They didn't talk about the past much. Didn't need to. Dot would hum low to the crickets, fingers curled around her new cane like it was part of her pulse. Her eyes were cloudier now, but her voice never wavered. "You still writing?" she'd ask. Ellie would nod. "Still listening, too." Dot smiled, soft and slow. "Then you'll always be ahead." On the first truly warm evening of the season, Ellie came out to find Dot already on the porch, blanket across her lap, tea cooling beside her elbow. She looked out over the yard like she saw more than trees. "You know what I miss?" Dot said. "Surprises. Real ones." Ellie grinned. "Then I won't tell you what I've got planned." Dot turned her head. "Good. Keep your secrets. Just don't forget where I left mine." Ellie stood at the podium, hands steady, the click of her shoes on the summit stage still ringing in her ears. Behind her, the screen read, "National Elder Justice Summit. Keynote, the day my grandmother listened back. E. Langston." The ballroom held maybe 200 people. Advocates, judges, doctors, journalists, students in the front row, policymakers in the back, pretending they hadn't come to be changed. The applause faded as Ellie adjusted the microphone. "My name is Ellie Langston. I run a blog called Listening Loudly. But before I ever wrote a word, I watched a woman change the rules by knowing when to stay quiet, until silence no longer served her." A low murmur of interest passed through the crowd. She was nearly erased from her own life, manipulated, lied to, gaslit in the very house she built. But what they didn't know was that she wasn't slipping, she was storing. Ellie took a slow breath and let her eyes scan the room. Then settle briefly on the front row where Ruth sat, hands folded, eyes bright. My grandmother didn't shout, she didn't storm, she didn't accuse. She listened, she collected, she transcribed the truth until it was unignorable. A few nods, a pause. She pressed forward. When they tried to take her house, she handed over court-certified audio. When they lied about her memory, she named every medication in her tray and every dosage down to the minute. When they tried to break her, she rewrote the story in legal ink. Ellie paused, then smiled. Her name was Dorothy Langston. She died 1 week ago. At home, with the windows open, with her archive intact. A beat. Sharp, quiet, heavy. And she died knowing they couldn't rewrite a thing. The room was stone still. Ellie stepped back just once, motioning to the projection screen behind her. It shifted to a photo. Dot on the porch, eyes half closed in the sun, cane by her side, a faint smile. the wind catching the hem of her cardigan. The kind of photo that looked like a goodbye only if you knew where to look. Then came the sound of applause, at first tentative, then rising, full, sustained. Back in Savannah, the Langston house was quiet. Dot sat in her favorite rocker, blanket across her lap, the new cane resting against her leg. The porch fan ticked gently above her. Henry had set up the live stream for her earlier that morning. The laptop sat open beside her, screen angled just right. She watched the applause like it was a distant memory made real again. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Inside, the house was freshly painted. Ellie's plants lined the windowsill. The blog's next post was scheduled. The files were locked, the locks were changed, the walls remembered. Outside, wind caught the edge of a page in Dot's lap, a printout of Ellie's final words on stage. She didn't fight loud, she fought smart. Dot's lips curled, not with satisfaction, but recognition. A few minutes later, her eyes fluttered closed, gentle and slow, like someone settling into a story they already knew the ending to. She didn't stir again. They thought I couldn't hear their plans. The microphone in my cane worked fine.